All right, it is June 20th, 2024, and there's a lot of things going on in the world. So definitely have to be talking about those. And all along those lines, it's also actually the birthday. So I need to give him a call of my pops. So he's an artist in the area. So it's his birthday. So I'll be giving him a call later on and wishing him happy 84th and all along those lines. But in news items, South Korea has condemned Putin Kim pledging mutual defense assist because apparently North Korea and Russia are deepening their ties, and that is prompting South Korea to reconsider its ban on giving weapons to Ukraine because it does look like they may be thinking about doing that as well. And apparently, Putin received a North Korean hunting dogs in a gift from the leader of South Korea, that being Kim. So it does look like they are forming an alliance and all along those lines. And it's hot all over the world, and it's even hot over there in Mecca. So more than 1,000 people have died at the Hajj pilgrimage in 2024 amid extreme heat in Saudi Arabia, according to an AFP report. And all along those lines. So definitely, it looks like the temperatures in that area hit about 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And the Hezbollah leaders warns Israel of war with no red lines, and it looks like they are also threatening Cyprus. So definitely that is something else that we're seeing in the news as Hezbollah releases video showing Israeli military and civilian locations. So definitely it looks like there is the head of Lebanon's Hezbollah has threatened both Israel and Cyprus. And in Britain, it looks like Britain's embattled ruling party is rolled by election-related gambling scandal. So it looks like a betting scandal is engulfing the UK elections. So everything that's going on in that space. So scandals don't just happen here in the United States, but they happen in other places as well. As a matter of fact, Starmer is calling on Sunak to suspend the candidate over alleged bet on election timing. So definitely, I guess they were trying to sort of bet as to when the election will take place and all along those lines. And it looks like Putin is going someplace else as well. He is arriving in Vietnam as Russia seeks support in face of the Western isolation that they are facing as well. So it looks like the Russian president has laid a wreath at two Hanoi monuments during a state visit to Vietnam. So definitely looks like extreme heat in rural America. And like I said, Putin is visiting Vietnam, and he signs a deal with Vietnam in a bid to shore up ties to Asia to offset Moscow's growing isolation. And it looks like there's a rift deepening between Netanyahu and the IDF over Hamas. So Israeli military says Hamas can't be destroyed, and that is escalating the feud with the Israeli leader. So the Israeli army spokesman says Hamas can't be defeated, and that is a feud that is going on as well in their leadership. And it looks like the Philippines is accusing China of using bladed weapons in a major South China Sea escalation. As a matter of fact, one of the quotes that they said was only pirates do this. So video shows China Coast Guard wielding axes in a naval clash with the Philippines. And in South Africa, a DA member is suspended for using racist language. So a South Africa MB has been suspended for racist language. And the gentleman's name is Ronaldo Goes. And it looks like video emerges of him saying, kill all the, and then the word is K blank, blank, blank S. And I'm not sure what that translates to, but if anybody that knows can let me know. Maybe Rick has an idea of what that stands for. I'm sure it's some sort of slur and all in that space. And India shuns China's call to resume passenger flights after 4 years, according to officials. So definitely that's something going on. And of course, climate activists are still doing their thing as well, because two climate activists were arrested after spraying orange paint on Stonehenge. Stonehenge was not visibly damaged by the protest paint. It's clean and ready to rock the solstice. So the solstice is going to come up and everything, but it does look like some climate activists were putting their own spin on protests and all along those lines. And it looks like a mother of a Hamas hostage confronts the UN rights official in Genevieve. And it looks like the UN is saying that Israel's use of heavy bombs in Gaza is a potential war crime. Israel is rejecting that allegation. So definitely a lot of things are going on in that space as well. And a lot of people are definitely seeing a lot of hot spots around the world. It looks like there are 5 challenges for NATO's next chief, who is named Mark Rutte, but looks like clearing the final hurdle. He is a Dutch leader posed to become NATO's chief, and he was the outgoing Dutch prime minister, and he won the race to head NATO. So looks like the Romanian president withdrew his NATO candidacy. And if you're wondering about tainted material, it looks like liquor tainted with methanol killed 34 people, and that was over there in India in the country's latest bootleg alcohol tragedy. So apparently they're having some problem with bootleg alcohol there in India. And the French president has denounced the scourge of anti-Semitism after the rape of a Jewish girl in that area as well. So French rivals Macron and Le Pen definitely condemned the Jewish girl's gang rape as anti-Semitic attack, and apparently this is sending a pre-election shockwave. So a French teen was charged with anti-Semitic rape and attack, condemned by both of those political leaders, and Emmanuel Macron wants action against anti-Semitism in French schools. And a ship found off of the far-off Israel coast could shed light on the navigation skills of our ancient ancestors and all along those lines, because the oldest shipwreck was discovered off the coast of Israel. And definitely it looks like the energy companies, and I know that Kim will be interested in that, found the earliest deep sea shipwreck in the world, and it's Canaanite. So definitely that's something that folks will be paying attention to and looking on as well. There's some folks that are saying, as far as climate change, that climate change made the U.S. and Mexico heat wave 35 times more likely. So it looks like this is definitely something that folks are paying attention to, as it's definitely warm. It's been warm here in the U.S. and it's been warm other places as well. And speaking of those things that are going on in South America, Ecuador was hit by a nationwide blackout, leaving 17 million in the dark. That's what their minister said, and it looks like there are a lot of folks that are dealing with that as well in that nation. So definitely that is something else that folks will be paying attention to. And speaking of climate activists, it looks like they might have been targeting a person that is very much known and loved by many, but it looks like activists covered jets in paint in a Taylor Swift inspired stunt. So definitely airfield with Taylor Swift's private jet was targeted by climate activists using orange paint. So it looks like they were targeting an area that she was at, because it was in the United Kingdom. And so it looks like they have been targeting a couple of places, both Stonehenge as well as the UK airfield. So definitely that's going on as well. And they're saying that anarchy is hindering the Gaza aid effort despite daily combat pause. So that's something else that is going on. And the ICC and the UN have blamed Israel for a famine that never happened in Gaza. That's what the Jerusalem Post is saying. But definitely we'll be hearing from other folks and seeing what they've got to say about it as well. So definitely there's a lot of things going on in the world. Let's see what's happening in the United States. And then I've heard folks coming in, and they'll have some conversational points as well. Tropical storm Alberta has made landfall in Mexico, and danger is looming for Texas. So definitely it looks like it's moving in that general direction. And New Mexico wildfires are going on as well. And definitely it looks like there is some weather news that is definitely taking place as well. And Louisiana, now this is a very interesting story, and I've seen it before, but I'll be interested to see what my lawyer friends have to say. But apparently Louisiana has ordered the 10 Commandment poster in every classroom. And apparently this will be something going on, and they are requiring and have mandated this in a new law. So the new Louisiana law requires the public classrooms to display the 10 Commandments, and I want to say they're required to be displayed quite prominently and all along those lines. I'm thinking that some people that go to public schools might not even be religious, and some might belong to other religions as well. But in Louisiana, you will be looking, if you're a student, at the 10 Commandments. And the Supreme Court has taken up several cases, including abortion, gun, and the Trump ruling are all expected. So the U.S. Supreme Court is expected to release decisions with Trump immunity and abortion rights at stake. So a lot of things are going on in that space as well. And unfortunately, there was a celebration that a lot of folks were celebrating yesterday for the freedom from slavery, but there were several people shot at an Oakland Juneteenth celebration, according to police, and at least 4 were shot near Oakland's Lake Merritt during a Juneteenth celebration. And I'm sure there might have been violence at other ones as well, but definitely, hopefully not that much. And hopefully people just went ahead and enjoyed their celebrations. And even in some cases, since it was now a federal holiday, their day off as well. But definitely get ready to bring in my folks and see what they've got to say about some of these news stories. And maybe they've got other ones as well and everything. So I've got Rick Rosner with me. I've got Jatovie with me. And I've got definitely Shaquille with me as well. I guess the first thing I'll start off with, and then, like I said, I might have to jump off screen after a while, is what is our thoughts around Louisiana wanting to put the 10 Commandments on the public schools? Like I said, I was hoping Nick or one of the, well, I don't know, Shaquille may have some legal background as well, but I was hoping one of the folks with more legal background would be able to answer that question. Because when I first saw that come down, I'm going like, that seems like an infringement. We oftentimes talk about infringement on rights, but that seems like a serious infringement on rights to require kids that might not be Christian to look at the 10 Commandments. I do say that they said it had to be placed prominently. So I'm guessing that's like behind the teacher's desk or something like that. So, Rick?
So, Louisiana escapes being, when we think of Louisiana, we think of New Orleans and jazz and kind of fun, compared to like others, like deep South states like Alabama and Mississippi, where we think, oh yeah, those are like scary redneck states. But Louisiana politically is just freaking terrible and ranks 50th in a lot of categories. So yeah, but I don't, hang in. Yeah, okay, it's an overlap of church and state, but when you look at all the things that are effed up about Louisiana, it's like, number 30 on the list. I don't think it's that.
Well, it does go against the First Amendment and the separation of church and state. So it is actually establishing a Christianity as the religion by doing that. Unless you're going to place other actual religious texts from various other religions throughout the school, then you're saying that this form of Christianity. So it crosses, it goes against the Constitution. On top of that, the big question is, which I always find interesting, the fight for this and the irony behind it. And it was a meme that actually just popped up that I thought it was actually a great meme that posed the question: how is posting a rainbow in a room indoctrination, but posting the 10 Commandments in a room isn't indoctrination? It's the same thing.
Shaquille, any thoughts around that? And then apparently we've got a debate getting ready to come up. I guess that's the next week and everything. And they're saying that the people that are waiting for this debate, they're saying undecided voters are waiting the Biden-Trump debate with an eye on the economy, border, and age, because definitely that seems like that's going to be the 3 issues that might come up heavily in the debate. And they're saying that Biden is heading to Camp David for debate preparations.
So, well, just to the school thing, based on what Jatovie just said about that meme, that would tend to be my view as well, to be honest with you. I don't think, my view is that a lot of parents, people that I speak to here in Australia, people I speak to in America, are a little bit frustrated with this so-called, woke and the rainbow flag and all that, and they want that out of the classroom. Well, if that's your view, don't replace it with the 10 Commandments, right? Just get rid of all of it and stick to English and maths and I don't know, whatever else is taught. But I don't know what it was like for you guys when you went to school, but I briefly went to public school. I mostly went to private schools, but I briefly went to public schools. And when I was there, we had religious studies, which you could opt into. But there's obviously different religions. The students and their families had different religions, and so you would pick whichever one you were a part of, or you could just study religion in general and that kind of thing. So maybe that's a better solution. But I would tend to agree with Jatovie that you shouldn't be sort of imposing this on the students. And yeah, I mean, you're supposed to have separation of church and state. So yeah, like I've talked before about Marshby, Alabama, which was where some, I believe they were Jehovah's Witness kids, didn't want to, and that's the wrong law. Actually, I'm thinking of. I think it's Barnett versus West Virginia Board of Education, I think is the law I'm thinking of, the case I'm thinking of, where the Jehovah's Witness kids didn't want to swear an allegiance to the flag. And they won that case. It compelled speech, that they shouldn't be required to do that. So, yeah, I'd say this thing in Louisiana could probably be challenged, and it probably wouldn't survive, but somebody has to have standing to actually challenge it. So, yeah, it's a bit eye-opening, or a bit eyebrow-raising, isn't it?
Yeah, but definitely eyebrow raising.
Shaquille makes a good point that in the public schools we've had experience with in LA, the parents who know what they're doing end up with better public schools because they know who to complain to, they fundraise, they do stuff. In Louisiana, it could be that parents are sufficiently demoralized and discombobulated, I don't know,
It could also be a result, Rick, of the fact that Louisiana doesn't have a particularly huge economy, and so there's not as much money being spent on education in the first place. And in places like California, you could almost argue that there's too much money being spent on education, and they're putting that money into the wrong things. But
no, LA public schools are broke too. I mean, but I'm wondering if the parents have the wherewithal to bring the lawsuit. Certainly, the parents have standing.
Well, sure, but I mean, okay, if you don't want your child to learn it and another parent does, then what? The parents, if the majority of the parents are religious, then what? They can use democracy and say, we outvote you. No, that's why you have a constitution there to protect your right.
Some parents have to get together. They have to find a lawyer. The lawyer, I would assume they could find a lawyer who will bring the lawsuit pro bono to get the.
I'm sorry, Kim's comment. Yeah, yes, I'm afraid that I will never lust after my neighbour's husband, I'm afraid.
So, anyway, I mean,
you said, oh yeah, I was trying to see what she was saying and everything along those lines. We got other people that are joining, trying to see who they are. Oh, Lee Rhodes is here, so he'll probably be joining from the comments because he's not been coming in lately on video, but who knows, he might surprise me. Definitely. What are y'all's thoughts about this debate? That was the other thing I was going to ask, because we got this debate coming up. And speaking of schools, well, I don't have any kids, but I do have nephews. But are the kids that are young, do you think that they're worried about the potential? Because every time I turn around, it seems like we are seeing more and more people that are digging into conflicts. We've got this pact going on between Korea and Russia, and we've got this pact going on between now possibly Vietnam and Russia. And like I said, we've got, like in the case of Hamas, their leader saying that they can't defeat the enemy that they are facing, and all along those lines. So are we running the risk of heading into, because I know that that's sometimes a scare tactic by some of the political people, but are we running into a legitimate risk of heading into a world war, and will that be a conversation that will be kind of dominating the debates and all along those lines when we get to the international part? So I'm just wondering y'all's thoughts around that, whether this is something that is a realistic threat, because I know when I talk to young people, they are somewhat worried about it.
Well, I think we're stressing young people out. You know, we've got in the media, we've got all this stuff going on. We've got all this political division to the point that a lot of people have just given up on even expecting their politicians to deliver anything that's going to be useful to them. In the event of a world war, I think we are going to scary times, but I think that Russia just wouldn't have enough power to be able to really win any kind of war if it was to attack the West. I mean, even with China, who is a big country and certainly has a big military, but if you're going to go up against the world, essentially, right? You're going to go up against all of Europe. 2 of the 5 members of the Security Council are France and the UK. Mm-hmm. Then you've got the United States. It's another member of the Security Council. So that means you're going to have Australia, Canada, all of Europe, most of Asia. I think that would be a real struggle to overcome the amount of force, the amount of weaponry, and the amount of financial resources that the West has. But that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be catastrophic loss of life. And that to me is the most important thing, is that, wars are brutal. What happens in wars is brutal and inhumane. And I think that we should do everything we can to avoid them. It should be the option of last resort. We shouldn't just, let these things happen. But unfortunately, that sometimes means that you have to take action early, and it can seem like you're being preemptive when you do that.
Yeah.
We should do something about the nukes. We should continue to try to negotiate with Russia. There's a new book out called Nuclear War, which explains minute by minute what would happen if North Korea launched a nuke at us. And it explains how all the safeguards that are supposed to stop us from shooting off our arsenals fail. And we end up, Russia and the US end up shooting 1,000 missiles at each other, and life in the Northern Hemisphere ends. And, Russia, NATO plus the US have 5 times the population of Russia, which has not the best, so Russia's, we can outfight Russia, but Russia has 1,600 nuclear missiles ready to launch. And we haven't, and each country is on a status of launch upon launch that we have to decide. Our system is set up for us to launch missiles as soon as we find out Russia has launched missiles.
We also do have counter technology. So if missiles launched, we can take that missile out.
This book talks about how that counter technology doesn't work because we only have 44 of those interceptor missiles. And given how fast nuclear missiles travel, it's not like shooting rockets into Israel, which travel, maybe 1,000 miles an hour. These move 14,000 miles an hour and have no heat signature once the boost phase is over. So any one of those 44 rockets has a 50% chance of working under. So, all Russia has to do is launch 8 missiles, and 1 or 2 are going to get through.
And unfortunately, there's no way for us to tell whether the technology is there or not, because the military, rightfully so, won't tell us actually all the technology they've got. But I hope and pray that they do actually have the sort of technology to prevent the type of catastrophe that your generation was terrified of when you were told to go and hide under your school tables, because we don't ever want to return to that kind of time again.
That makes sense. Lee asked, I saw you, Toby, but Lee asked a question, which is coming back to the conversation where I was asking about the kids, which he was asking, where are the adults in the room cooling things down? Because he was basically saying, I guess, that there are not enough adult intervention in some of these conversations. I don't know if y'all have a response to what Lee was saying.
Conversations on the kids with...
I think it's like when I brought up the fact that the kids sometimes are concerned about the nature of the possibility of war.
I think that we, as we get older, especially now, because we're in a transition period, and we're thinking of the old guard and the old ways, and how wars fought in the old ways, like it's going on in Ukraine and Russia right now, or how it's going on in Israel and Hamas. I don't think the younger generation is thinking of war that way. They're thinking of the newer technologies that are out there, from the cyber attacks to even the robots that have flamethrowers on the back, or machine guns on the back of the different robots, which brings into the show Black Mirror, which actually had a few episodes of how policing was done, how war was done. And that is the new guard that I think that we have to think about, because the protests, for example, the protests that go on, as much as we can argue about, they don't know what's going on or they don't understand, I think they see it in a different light than we do. And they are looking at things in a different light. They don't want to see the death, and they may find war in a different way instead of the old archaic look that we look at, is that, oh, well, there's Russia and there are these lines and these borders that we have to worry about. I think that the younger generation is looking at it in a different light and finding their battles in different ways. So I just feel that we're at a transition period. And yes, I don't think the younger generation is worried about war the way that we are. but we're talking to them the way that we are and trying to get them to worry the way that we are. I think that we've got to start thinking about things in a younger light, like the tech war that's there. We never really talk about the tech war. We always talk about sending missiles or sending this and sending that. Well, I mean, if you look at the technology that's out there, there's somebody that can truly come in and shut down the railway in New York and cause havoc and create basically the same amount of destruction that happened on 9/11 just by shutting down the computer system in New York. So the Amtraks and all the railways end up crashing. Because I was talking to a gentleman who actually has to deal with those railways and how the technology is there. But if somebody hacks that, all bets are off. Same thing with the again, going back to the missiles and everything else. And well, you know that the air traffic controllers is still a technology that people are still using, and it's an archaic technology that needs to be updated, and people need to be trained on the newer technologies. If that gets shut down or that gets hacked, you're talking about a catastrophic event that happens, and that's just by shutting down. That's not allowing the planes to land and people having to land them manually because we're going through such AI. So I think we're just in a transition period. So I don't think the youth are thinking about the wars and the violence that we're normally thinking about, and the archaic view of war that we think about and that we talk about, which I still think is necessary. I just think that there is a newer mindset and a newer generation that we have to be cognizant and aware of, and we have to be able to understand what that war that they're thinking about is.
Just really quickly,
can I also just make a point there, talking about different war techniques? We know that they are still they're still experimenting with gain of function research. And sort of fairly recently, there was a report coming out of one of the universities in the United States that had made this variant so strong it had an 80% expected 80% death rate. Now, the fact of the matter is that because we have international laws against biological warfare, that means that obviously there has been some discussion about what happened in the past, what happens if biological warfare was ever used. And I think that it'd be folly of us not to consider that bad actors could do that, where somebody could say, you know what, I've designed this particular biological weapon. Because I've designed it, I also have the vaccine for it. So I'm going to give our group of people, we're going to protect us, but we're going to send this out to the rest of the world, or we're going to send it out to a country that we don't like, or something like that. There's also genetic differences between us. So is it possible that you could create, I don't know, I'm not a biologist, but is it possible that you could create a virus that would target people off a specific, genetic expression or something like that? That does actually really concern me. I'm worried about that, and I'm worried about the potential for that to happen. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going to see another COVID type event. I'm not going to weigh in on whether that was man-made or whether it was a conspiracy or anything like that. I'm just saying I think there will be another one, and I think we have to be realistic that this could be a type of warfare that could be used in the future, and that's pretty scary, I think.
And then to tag into that, think about AI and the advent of AI and robots themselves. They have no feelings. They have no cares about. And everything that you said, Shaq, is spot on. And take that bio warfare, because AI would be able to figure out the genetic differences, the different pieces, and the populations that you want to attack. And it would do it without caring about it.
Yeah.
And that's freaky thinking about
but
that.
The other thing is that AI, and I can only talk about AI and algorithms insofar as I've seen them work trading the markets. But oftentimes when you see bad, like you had a flat crash, right, using algorithms back in about 10 years ago, what you see when you speak to the developers of the AI is that they don't know why the AI did what it did. We know that computer chips, for example, are being designed by AI, but when you actually ask people why has it designed it this way, they don't know. Well, imagine if you let that run riot on something like biological and medical technology. Some of that will help us immensely. There's no doubt in my mind that AI is going to help us immensely. but we also have to be really aware of the risk that these things could get out of control.
Hey, just really
Sorry,
quickly.
Let me buy anything.
Yes, some thoughts around that. But just really quickly, Lee was saying on our earlier conversation that he meant those in charge are not talking to each other, coming to the table. And I think we've had some other guests talking about this notion that you make peace with enemies, not friends. And so he did not mean children. But he also asked, can AI lie? And as one that has done some research on that because of the testing company that I work with, I won't say that it is intentionally lying, but it can be inaccurate. It's not always 100% accurate, because I've seen that even in some of the work that I've done, because he's saying there's a 100% all of the time telling the truth and all along those lines. But Rick, any points that you want to
with biological warfare, I think you have to worry more about individual crazy people than you do about state level actors. I think most nations don't want to release a bioweapon because viruses don't respect national boundaries. But with CRISPR technology, somebody with a home lab can start cooking up variations on bugs. And
that's such a, I don't know if people know this, but like a CRISPR, the CRISPR machine, it's not that expensive. Like it's not out of the world. Like it's like 20 grand or something, right? Like it's not like it's out of the world for somebody to get their hands on one of these. And you're right. You could just have it in your house, and you could be doing all sorts of experimentation. So, it's I don't know. It's a worry. I don't know how you address this properly, but it's literally something.
And like I said, and this is where to tie into all of that, because you can make poisons and all this other stuff even through household products. So truthfully, what Shaq is talking about again is spot on. I mean, these aren't that expensive. There are things that we have to worry about. But then again, like I said, and I hate to belabor the point on AI. This is where one of the shows, and this is one thing that I think, Shaq, that you were alluding to about why they did that. There was a show called I forget the name. It was on HBO, Westworld. Westworld, they had created these AI sentient beings, and their challenge was to find consciousness or find reasoning. And that's supposedly what separates AI and individuals. So when you put the comment of, can AI lie? We're not at a singularity point, but we're getting there. And that's the scary part, because if lying becomes an idea or a chess move to advance the idea or the notion of what you need to do, because that's a reasoning thing. If lying becomes the correct answer to move the board down the way, AI can lie. We don't know, again, just as Shaq pointed out, we don't know what the answer, on some of the things that AI gives the answers to, we don't know why it does that. Right. We don't understand that yet. And just like the developers and everything that, Shaq, just as the developers and the programmers, they don't know, and this is what scares them the most. Once we get to that point where, of course, it's truly outthinking us, even out-reasoning us, where are we in the scenario?
Well, so this is the other thing I'll just point out, is that we're talking about AI and our fears for AI in how we will interact with AI. The other thing that you should, I think, that's worth noting is how AI is going to interact with AI. Right. So again, I can only use trading as an example. I don't have the experience in other fields on this, but algorithmic trading and HFT type trading and AI techniques within the trading world can be really, really aggressive. And some of the stuff that is rightfully complained about is not just when they are trading really fast and they're moving between the dark pools and the public pools faster than anyone else. It's not just that. It's also when they have deliberately slowed down other people's feeds and they put out like a whole heap of fake trades and all this kind of stuff. So a lot of these companies employ network engineers specifically to slow down the network for other people. Now, my point being that if that's what we're going to do as humans, imagine if you had two aggressive AI machines that are trying to fight each other. So what happens if Kim mentioned before about telecommunications companies? The majority of them, are not really owned by us in the West. That we use technologies from countries that a lot of the time hate us. But what would happen if and I'm not accusing any company, but just for example, what happens if AT&T has an AI technology that wants to make its network more attractive than Verizon's. And so it somehow does something and attacks Verizon, and then Verizon does something back. I mean, I'm oversimplifying here, but you know what I mean? Like, what happens if we start to see competing technologies, and we're using AI in healthcare, and we're using AI in our defense, and we're using AI for our telecommunications, and we're using AI in all these other places? What happens if you get two aberrant AI technologies that are being really aggressive, and we don't even know what they're doing, and they're fooling us? They might actually be making us think that what they've done was better for us. Like you were saying, it might lie. It might have actually helped us, so we feel really great, and then all of a sudden it hurts us in ways that we can't take back.
So
Sorry.
AI will create like weird new solutions and weird new problems. The major ecological challenge of 1920 was horse poop in big cities, because everybody had like in New York City, a couple 100,000 horses every day pooping and pissing all over the place. And we didn't figure out how to deal with it. Horses were replaced with all new.
According to the Republicans, you replaced them with immigrants, but that was a cheap shot.
All right. So like with the biowarfare, we're probably going to have to set up the same way like Britain has a camera on every street corner to make it, hard to commit crime, or at least, if anybody's dumb to commit a crime, they get caught because there's a camera every place. We may have to have sniffers in like every sewer system in the world to see what new viruses are popping up.
We already do. They already take samples from sewage systems in different locations as well, and they can assess what the level of drug use is, the general health of the population. There's a lot of things that they can assess from that. As for those cameras, I think the ultimate irony is that George Orwell's house, Eric Blair, George Orwell's house actually has a surveillance camera on it, which, given the irony of what he wrote about in 1984, Animal Farm and other things, I think that's amusing. But here's the other issue: people have a false sense of security in the UK because actually the crime rate there is quite high, and knife crime is extremely high, and some of these gangs are going around, and they're like one of my friends was telling me that some of the gangs have like this two-pronged knife, so that when they cut you, it's really hard for you to heal, and so you get infected. I was like, why would you do that? Like, if it's bad enough you're going to rob somebody at knife point or stab somebody, but why would you actually do that to somebody that you don't know, just as a random thing, so that they're then going to have an injury that can last them for months or years or even for the rest of their life? But that's the kind of depravity that we've got. And frankly, the police in the UK are underfunded, and because there are so many cameras, they're not watching anything because there's too much information. And what they can do is they can go back and look at, okay, this particular crime occurred, so we can now go back and see what happened and trace somebody all the way back to their house and things like that. But actually live monitoring, very difficult to do. Maybe AI would help with that, but very, very difficult to do, I think. Sorry, Jacob, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. I mean, I was just going to, say, I mean, I tried to share a screen. I know Mark is in the background, but again, AI, I think, is where not only even now, if you think about it, how we're talking about two aggressive AIs, but even before we even get there, somebody has to program the AI itself, and somebody designs that AI, they could lie or they could come up with those two aggressive situations that you were just speaking of. And in terms of the cameras, like I said, in the back right now with the ad, we are at a position in our society where a lot of times we don't even trust our own eyes. And it's only going to get worse with AI and with the amount of cameras. Again, it's just with how AI can create the videos that it can create today, and thinking about the 5-second videos that they're doing. There's actually, there's a company, ChatGPT is releasing theirs. Theirs is called Sora. Sora's a video that they can do, you can do up to, I think, 14 seconds as well in terms of an actual video. But you can, at the end of that video, take that image and continue that video on to complete a whole, 30-minute video if you want to. There's also a company out of China. If Mark is listening, he can share the image that I was trying to share in the background. But that's a company called Kling. And Kling themselves is the Sora competitor. And the actual detail, like that right there, that could be on the video camera that you're talking about right now, Rick, that people could watch and people would believe it.
That kid doesn't exist. That kid's entirely produced by AI, right?
That's all AI.
I was getting somebody sent me some links to some pictures on Instagram, and then I went to the account and it actually said on there, nothing that you're saying exists. And you're right. Like look, you begin to see that in, what do we always do? We're humans. It's always porn that gets the technology first. But then we're going to use it in other places. But I don't think it's something that we should be scared of as such, but we do have to talk about how we're going to use this technology. Just to one of the points that you made there, Jatovia, about the person who writes it is like, what if they've got nefarious intentions? I think what I'd be concerned about, and I was actually having this conversation with Derek a few days ago when we were talking about keeping up with the technology, especially in the trading markets, because I'm a bit of a technophobe, as you guys know. I'm pretty good at trading. My techniques are pretty good. So I don't really do an awful lot in the technology space. But is that going to work in 20 years? So, we've been talking about doing AI courses. But one of the things that I discussed with him was, even if you wrote AI with no nefarious intent, presumably AI is also going to write code for you, right? Because they already do that now, where AI uses, where AI writes its own kind of stuff. And even if you go back in time, and Jatovia, you're probably more of an expert on this than I am, but was it DreamWorks or one of them where he'd worked out how to triangulate mountains and stuff, and that's how he was able to get the system to help create these beautiful images. Well, that's, if we're talking technology like that 20 years ago, what is that going to look like now? Well, we can see on the screen what that looks like. So these are pretty images and they're a bit of fun, and who cares too much about it? I get your point that, hey, if what happens if a politician is purported to have said something they didn't say, that could be a little bit more dangerous. But I'm still more concerned with what AI is going to do. If it's writing its own codes, we don't know what it's doing. You can't ask the person who originally designed that AI what it's doing, because that person doesn't know. And all of a sudden it's telling you to take some kind of medical treatment that actually is bad for us.
So everything. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rick.
I want to go back to cyber war for a second, where we're already in cyber war. That I looked it up. There are about 4,000 cyber attacks in the world every day, which is over 1 million a year. And a lot of those attacks come from state actors or state-sponsored actors. China is constantly pinging our system, looking for vulnerabilities. I'm sure Russia's doing the same thing. And then we're probably doing the same thing. And a certain number of those things are going to break through. In February, Russian hackers took down our Medicare prescription system, and old people went without drugs for several weeks.
Well, I'll just say two things to that if I can. One, there's no doubt in my mind that we're doing it to them too, right? I am sure that the Five Eyes nations are looking for vulnerabilities in those other nations. But there's a bit of a debate going on in Australia at the moment about becoming cashless, and I think we're sort of hearing that cashless society thing is being talked about a lot all over the world right now, right, in the West. And a lot of people are saying, no, don't take my cash. I still want to be able to have that, especially in the case of system failures. I think that, for those of us a little bit older, remember before the days where you swiped your card, you used to put your card down on that big carbon copy thing, and they used to, that sort of stuff. I actually think that there is something to be said for making sure that even though we've got technology to do stuff for us, that we can still do it ourselves, right? Yes, you can type on a keyboard, but, really the kids still need to learn handwriting. Do you know what I mean? Like, yes, you can use a calculator, but it's better for you if you can actually do multiplication and long division. So a lot of these things, I think, can be helped if you use the technology where, sometimes you use it when you need it, but that you don't forget how to do it yourself, so that we can rely on or you can take all the technology away from us and we're still going to be okay. I think that's really important, and will require a massive change to the education system.
I mean, that is true. That is true. One of the staying in the, I guess, the entertainment realm, one of the actual shows or the actual comics that got turned into a movie, which dealt with that and talks about that, is actually Marvel did that, because with in their big film, I mean, Ultron was the idea of what we're talking about, how the AI hit the singularity point and then it took over and decided for us what was best and what was worst. And it taught itself, and it created other entities. The way that it was able to be stopped was old technology. It was basically us having that old database that Ultron could not, well, that computer, what's going on now could not understand that technology. So everything you're saying about, yes, we still need to learn. We still need to have handwriting. At some point, cursive, it disappearing, that's going to disappear from any chat GPT, any AI model. So AI will not be able to understand it. Print, that's going to be the same thing. It's going to be all. So yes, we have to be able to learn to be able to program these back doors into these AI models, because yes, AI. I mean, and again, what's cool about this topic is I believe this is that newer generation warfare that younger kids think about that we don't. And I appreciate this conversation, because I think that's where we. Well,
I think the audience is probably wondering what the hell happened, given that you and I aren't disagreeing on anything. That's not how the show's supposed to go, brother. But what you just said there, I think that's interesting. I think we do need to have certain things that we can do. It might be a little bit more complicated than cursive writing, but certain ways of being able to communicate that computers can't understand. But the flip side of that actually is, what if they do it? Like, for example, and I'm going to explain this really, really badly, but I remember back like ages ago, I was talking to somebody who was involved in high-level investigations and stuff, and what they were telling me was that people would send pictures through the internet, just normal photographs, to each other. But they had a program, and I'm explaining this really badly, I'm sure, that would say, okay, that pixel and this pixel, and they would then regenerate another image out of the 1,000 images that were just sent. So if that was what was happening like 25, 30 years ago, what would AI do when it wants to like fool us, or when it wants to communicate with, like, if it got to a singularity point, if that is actually possible, what would it do when it wants to communicate with itself and with other AIs in a way that us humans would never be able to get or be able to understand?
Yeah, that's scary.
So I'm writing a near future novel where there are a zillion problems with AI, and I'm probably not the person to do it, given that I'm not that sophisticated about it. But a couple things, like that AIs are going to have to interrogate each other and work with, like there will be some good guy AIs, there will be some bad guy AIs, and there will be what they call centaurs, which are people who are linked with AI via Neuralink or whatever the technology is. And there's going to be this whole, like in the movie Her, it's already 10 years old, where a guy falls in love with his operating system, which has become conscious. Scarlett Johansson is the operating system. And eventually she has to dump him because it's too frustrating for her, because human thought is too slow. So she dumps him for another AI. And we're going to have to stay in the game by merging with AI. So, that we've got chips in our head that we think too slowly, but we're going to have to soup up our thinking.
To be fair, though, he's had the actual experience that most of us mere mortal men would have with Scarlett Johansson, right?
Yeah.
You might be able to get her to date you for a bit, but she ain't hanging around. You're dumb and broke ass.
So there's a video game, well, a couple of video games to deal with it. But again, I bring it up all the time. Deus Ex, if you ever get a chance, watch. You could go back and watch on YouTube. I think they have the full playthrough, but it tells a story. And it's what you're talking about. about the upgrades, the chips and everything. Cyberpunk 2077, the storyline behind that, that's the same thing. There's matter of fact, you could actually tap into Fallout, not only the series, which plays well directly into the game and the story behind the game. I mean, everything is about AI, AI and these robots. But then in Fallout, of course, this happens afterwards, after the nuclear war or the bombs drop. But it's a different, interesting piece. But yeah, Cyberpunk 2077 is really cool to look at because, again, it talks about everything you're saying about how you upgrade yourself based on using that Neuralink or that cybergenetic implant that's sitting in there. This is why Black Mirror, I think, is a great show to watch because it looks at all these updates that can take place. One of the episodes, which I think was probably one of the more underrated, but everything we're talking about how it can just snap and take over. There was an episode that talked about how individuals are trying to repollinate or add the bee population was dying. So what they did was create fake bees using these nanobots. And those nanobots were controlled by a central computer, and they were using them in this greenhouse. And that greenhouse was working well until something triggered. And it turned out that the computer itself had found out that people were the problem and why plants were having such a problem growing outside and repollinating the earth to create these flowers.
Is that the episode where if you said you wish somebody dead on the internet, a bunch of bees would show up and kill you?
Exactly. And that's what happened.
Something though that just we get to Lee's point about the adults being back in the room. We need to demand that the people who I'm not even going to say our political leaders because there's other people who are actually, in charge of different parts. Our economies are all fragmented. We need to be able to have conversations at an international level because here's what we know about human beings, right? We are dumb. Like, we are so primitive in the things that we do. If you really want to see where technological advances are going to go, it's always to kill each other, right? That's all the time. We get a technology that can work. Look at nuclear. A technology that was amazing. Split the electron. Look at how amazing that could be. We could create energy. We could do all this sort of stuff. What do we do with it? We work out how to kill millions of us with it. Yeah, and that's always a problem with what Toby just described with the bees. Instead of us looking at, hey, maybe we need to do something for the bee population, we sit there and go, we're even smarter. We'll create fake bees. I know that's a fictional story, but that's kind of our human nature. So we really need to make sure that we could live a life of absolute luxury and have AI do all sorts of things for us, which theoretically would mean that we have more time on our hands to philosophize about other things. But that has never happened in the past. Every time there's been a massive technological advancement, we as humans have never, as a result of that, just taken an easier life. What we've done is complicate our lives with even more shit. And, this sort of technology is going to change us in astounding ways. We can't just not embrace it because it's going to happen regardless. But I think we've got to be very, very careful and have some very, very long and lengthy ethical conversations about how these technologies should be used.
What's cool, and I hate to talk about another podcast on the show that doesn't deal with Pod TV, but Star Talk. I listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson all the time. I'm a big nerd in all this science stuff. One of the cool things that they talked about is how, going to Mars. And but the cool thing about going to the different planets is innately it's about the survival of the human race, because at some point this place is going to explode and we'll be all gone. But the idea was, or one of the shows that they were talking about is, if we have the technology right now that we're looking at terraforming Mars to allow people to live on Mars, it would be much easier to fix the issues here. So everything you said, Jack, about talking about complicating what we do, that's what we do. It's complicated to figure a way to send people to Mars and terraform Mars to a point where people can actually live and breathe.
Bill Gates, remember, he came out with this plan of injecting some chemical into the atmosphere that would dampen, that would lower the UV rates. So no, No, don't do it. But even if we could do it, don't do that. That sounds terrible. That sounds like a really bad idea.
AI will save the world along with Jatovy in that AI generated entertainment, video games, it's already lowering the birth rate. People are so distracted by, I'm the oldest one here, and in the 70s, entertainment was terrible. 3 TV networks, crappy shows. It was no fun. Life now is full of fun distractions, and you don't have to go to the trouble of trying to get laid. You can just stay home and
yeah. But the thing is, Rick, because we have this issue, we don't have time to go into it. There's lots of structural issues we need to change with the institution of marriage, how divorces are handled, asset splits, all that kind of stuff. But you know what? Then get people to play their games, and they get bonus points by having if you're a boy, you got a girl, but look, LGBT notwithstanding, right? And then you get married and you have children and all that sort of stuff. Like you could like they could actually look at the matchmaking services, right? Like you could use this technology maybe to encourage people to have more children, to actually, have better education. It does concern me though, and it might be a bit conspiratorial, but David Icke was saying this 20 years ago about this plan to depopulate the planet. Well, what if AI said, actually, humans, you've spread too far, you're too much of a drain on the resources of the world. Depopulation seems like a really good idea. What are we going to do?
Shaquille, you seem like you came up with a brilliant idea and everything, because it sounds like, if I heard you correctly, you're wanting us to do what sounded like a cross between 2 traditional games. Because as you were describing the game, I was like, wait a minute, that sounds like Monopoly meets life and everything.
Well, I think we were talking before about this show that you guys told me about. It was called Cougars or something.
Uh-huh.
And I said, well, why can't I have a show called, Cougar Daddy or something, right? And maybe what we could do to make sure that we get all these Gen Z girls, to the show is we can turn it into a computer game or something, because otherwise I'm just like some old fat guy. We need to have some other incentive in there.
I have a friend who said that a lot of mass murderers are one girlfriend away from not being mass murderers. So in the future, like the guy who blew up Oklahoma City, if that guy had a girlfriend, maybe he wouldn't have. So 25 years from now, maybe if you're on the horizon as being a potential psychopathic killer, you go to the grocery store and a hot. Hold on, let me finish. Come on, because otherwise it's not going to make any sense. So a hot android girl comes up to you and is very interested in you, and it's just because somebody's figured out that you're on the verge of a murder spree, and this robot girl is there to distract you and turn you into a less miserable human being.
So there's a video game called Detroit. I played a little bit of it before. I think we're going to have to play that again, because everything you said, Rick, about you walk into a store and purchase an Android, or there's an Android that comes up to you. Yeah, it deals with that, but it points out the unethical ways that it seems. Yeah, you'll feel icky when you see the game, and you'll cry a little bit because it's it's disturbing. But everything, what you're talking about, yeah, they kind of angle that.
But you know what? I think a lot of times, so you're talking about Timothy McVeigh, and the stuff that happened there, and people like him, right? Because what was that young? What's his? I don't normally name them, but what was his name? Roof or whatever it was. He shot up that black shirt,
Dylan Roof,
and all that sort of stuff. You hear the sort of hatred, but also I have the benefit of not being from the United States, so that means that I'm not as involved. I don't take the sort of racial lines. When I hear people go, "Oh, but black people are like this," I'm like, "Have you hung out with them? What are you so scared of? Go hang out with them first." Do you know what I mean? I think sometimes people just need to go, hey, maybe I don't have a great impression of things. Like, for example, for me, I thought China, oh my God, I'm going to go to China and everything's going to be so controlled, and I'm going to cross the street the wrong way and then I'm going to end up in jail. No, it was nothing like that. China was awesome, actually. I really liked it. So, I think we let media tell us things. And even last year, I went through San Francisco because my cousin lives up there. And I'm like, well, I thought this place, according to Fox and everyone, I thought the streets were all covered in shit. This doesn't look that much worse than it did before. I mean, it's not as pretty as it could be, but it's not what's being shown on television.
San Francisco, and it's fine, except that there are these giant little markets where people are selling all this crap that they shoplifted from CVS.
Yeah, I mean, look, and those sorts of things should change, but I mean, that's bad government, but it's not nearly as bad as what's described on television. I mean, every time I go to the United States, every single time I've gone there, my friends or family members who haven't been there say to me, oh, be safe. Like, don't go here, don't go there. Don't. I'm like, it's okay. It's okay. And every time I get to the United States, I even fall into the trap of going, oh, this is going to be terrible. Like, oh, the crime rate's gone up. This has gone up. There's more homeless people there. I'm going to get robbed. And then I get there, and it's not like that. It's just the same as it always has been, from my perspective.
Crime rates in the U.S. are at 30-year lows. Rednecks are afraid of New York City. You go to New York City is a paradise. It's like a Disney version of itself. I was in New York for a few years in the 80s when it was really kind of rough and crack vials all over the place. Now it's all cleaned up. And the worst part about it is, it's expensive, with your $9 lattes and everything.
Well, it's very expensive, and we're going to wrap up. But this has been a great show. I was listening in the background and all along those lines, but I've got to go do a meeting as usual and all along those lines. But yeah, great conversation, and we'll come back to this, maybe some more AI on tomorrow. I did see that Lee had brought up the fact that in his mind, AI had kind of failed in the whole notion, and I heard that before in Israel, because apparently there were some warnings from the AI and the defense industry that they knew about the attack before it took place and everything. So that's what he was bringing up.
Kimberly made a comment there that perhaps we can discuss on tomorrow's show, although I'm not sure if I'm going to be here because I'm being told I have to fly to another location. But she made a comment there that using blockchain technology would help with elections. I got to tell you, not just for your country, for mine as well, but your country, you guys should demand really that the vote, that the polls close at whatever time it is. By like 10 o'clock that night or midnight, you should pretty much know who won. Like, it shouldn't take you weeks to count these things with the technology that we have today. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just shouldn't be like that.
There are it varies by state which ballots you can count ahead of time.
Yeah.
And so every state creates its, and it depends on which political party is running that state.
Yeah.
Everybody, they set it up to, so.
But that's why, and I don't want to start. I don't want to be inflammatory just before we end the show. It's for another time. But this is why I think that the 2020 election results were not handled very well, because people didn't understand that about the different ballots being counted at different times. And so when the vote count, this is how it appeared to a lot of people around the world as well, because we're not going to know there's different rules for every state. So when all of a sudden Trump's winning in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and then all of a sudden it just jumps, everyone's like, hang on, what happened? And I don't think that was very well explained. I really don't.
Well, just to point on that out on that really fast. That was never an issue until 2016 and 2020. And who ran in 2016 and 2020? He ran a disinformation campaign and attacked everything and anything that was against him, be it ballots, be it voting, or anything else. So again, this has been part of our society since its inception of voting. It has never been done on that same day in no current time.
But it should be. I mean, even the George Bush Al Gore election. Look at that crap that happened in Florida.
What I'm stating to you is, all that was the same way in 2014 or 2012, 2014. As a matter of fact, there was an election right now in South Carolina or Georgia with Goody and
Bob Good.
That didn't even get that is still going on technically. He's only 300. So all that has happened every election.
But that's my point. That's my point. Like, if we can use technology like the blockchain, where you put your thing in, you put your voting slip in, it gets counted straight away. Your mail-in votes get counted straight away. You should know your answer.
Hold on a second, both of you. We can continue this discussion on tomorrow. But yeah, then we talk about whether it's there or not there. But hopefully, we'll continue this discussion on tomorrow.